I'm 22 now. But for the first 15 years of my life, I was introduced to the world as someone I wasn't. When I was 6, I tried calling my mother Mom at the grocery store. She bent down to my level and whispered sharply, "You don't call me that in public. I'm Auntie Megan, remember?" I nodded, confused, and went back to pushing the little cart she gave me to stay distracted. Whenever we went anywhere, it was always the same. Megan, my actual mother, would introduce me as her niece. "This is my sister's daughter, Fallon," she'd say with a bright, practiced smile. I had to smile too. That was part of the routine. She never talked about my dad. When I asked, she would change the subject or pretend she didn't hear me. Once in 3rd grade, I pushed harder. She snapped, said it was complicated, and that I shouldn't bring it up again. We lived alone in a 2-bedroom rental in a small town. It was just the 2 of us, but she never let me put up family photos at school. My About Me poster in 2nd grade had to say I lived with my aunt. When the teacher asked why, I just shrugged. Extended family events were rare. When they did happen, I had to go with Megan's older sister, Claire. Claire would pick me up, brush my hair, and make me call her mom around everyone. I didn't like it. Her hugs were stiff and she never remembered my birthday. Claire acted like I belonged to her at church, school meetings, even a dentist appointment. Once I had to sit next to Claire while she signed in as my mother. All my school records had her last name on them. Megan handled the paperwork in secret and said it was just easier this way. When I was 14, my school counselor called me in after a group presentation where I talked about my aunt. She asked why I never mentioned my parents. I got nervous, then defensive, and eventually just shut down the conversation. She didn't push, but she watched me differently after that. One night, I was digging through a drawer looking for a flashlight. I found a small envelope with my name written in cursive. Inside was a folded piece of paper, my birth certificate. It listed my full name, my birth date, and Megan as my mother. The space for father was blank. I waited until the weekend to bring it up. My Megan looked at me for a long time, then said it was a legal mix-up from when she was very young. She didn't explain further. That was the end of the conversation. After that, things changed. I stopped calling Claire Mom. I stopped calling Megan Auntie. I didn't say anything else, but I started to pull away. Megan didn't force the names again, but she became stricter about my online presence. She deleted my Facebook account when I used her last name. When college application season came, everything became a mess. All my records were under Claire's name, and every form had to go through her. Megan acted like it was normal. She filled things out like it was her right. I wanted to scream, but I kept quiet. The confirmation came in the most unexpected way. Megan's mother, my grandmother, was in the hospital for a short stay while I visited. She looked at me and said, "Megan was just a kid when she had you. Barely more than a child herself." Then she fell asleep, but it was all I needed to hear. A few weeks later, Megan called to invite me to her 20th wedding anniversary party. I didn't want to go, but then she mentioned it was a formal event. Over 100 guests, speeches, toasts, the whole thing. Something in me snapped into focus. I told her I'd be there, and that was when I started planning what I'd say. The whole thing still didn't make sense. Why pretend? Why build a fake life around a lie? I started digging. Megan had me at 17, while Claire had been married for years and trying to fix a shaky marriage. From what I could gather, Claire offered to take care of things. Megan never fought it. They raised me like a secret. Claire got the spotlight as the perfect mother, while Megan got to keep her academic job in a conservative university town. I was the living, breathing alibi that made Claire's life look fuller, more stable. I was a prop, and they both used me. My boyfriend, who I'd been dating for almost a year, had never met Megan. I always gave vague excuses. One night, I told him everything. He sat silently, then just said, "You're going to tell them, aren't you?" I decided to, and not quietly. The day before the party, I printed 2 versions of a speech. One they were expecting and one that finally told the truth. I tucked the real one in my bag. The only thing I couldn't get rid of was the image that had burned into my brain. An old photo my grandmother had once mailed me. Megan, wearing a hospital gown, holding a newborn baby with swollen eyes and a hollow stare. Me. That was the moment I stopped wondering if I was overreacting. They lied for years. And at that anniversary party, I was going to say it out loud. I RSVP'd yes to the anniversary party the same day Megan sent the invite. I didn't ask questions. I thanked her, told her I'd be there, and kept it simple. I didn't want to give anyone a reason to get suspicious. The party was being held at a vineyard about 2 hours from where I lived. Formal dress code. Megan reminded me over text to wear something appropriate. Nothing too dark, nothing too bright, and definitely nothing attention-grabbing. I told her I'd figure it out. Then I bought a deep navy dress, sleek and simple, but not what she would have picked. A week later, I got an email from Megan. They were putting together a list of people to speak during the dinner and asked if I'd do a short tribute since I was part of the family. Her exact words were a few kind words, light and loving. I replied yes again, but I already knew I wasn't reading what she thought I would. That night, I sat at my laptop and wrote 2 speeches. One was full of what she expected stories about family dinners, memories of childhood, gratitude. The other started with a question. Why would a mother hide her daughter in plain sight for 15 years? I saved both and kept the second one password protected. The next time I saw my therapist, I told her the entire plan. She didn't tell me not to do it. She just said, make sure you're ready for what comes after. I booked another session for the following week. 3 days before the party, Claire called. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice was calm, but the words weren't just a reminder. She said, let's not rehash old misunderstandings. This weekend is about love and family. I didn't call back. Instead, I scheduled a consultation with a lawyer I found online, someone who specialized in name corrections and identity documentation. I told her the story. She said it would be tricky, but doable. I'd need to submit a notarized copy of my birth certificate and possibly get a formal affidavit declaring the circumstances. I booked a follow-up for the week after the party. I also emailed my old high school. I told them I needed to correct student records for college verification. They asked for proof of guardianship and clarification from the listed parent, Claire. I didn't respond yet. I was waiting to make it public first. 2 days before the party, a letter came in the mail. Handwritten address, no return name. Inside was a folded card and a photograph. The card was from my grandmother, Megan, and Claire's mother. She apologized for staying quiet for so long. The photo was a grainy print of Megan, no older than 17, lying in a hospital bed and holding a newborn. No one else was in the picture. Later that evening, I called a cousin I still spoke to sometimes. I didn't give much away, but I asked if she remembered anything strange about when I was little. She paused, then said, I always thought it was weird how no one ever mentioned your dad. And Claire didn't look pregnant before you showed up. She didn't push further, but that was enough. Through a college friend who worked in university archives, I got access to a faculty roster from 23 years ago at Megan's university. Me. One name stood. A married professor who left abruptly the year Megan got pregnant. I wasn't going to track him down. I just wanted to confirm the timeline. It fit. I looked through an old shoebox of documents I'd kept since I was 16. My fake school ID with Claire's last name. My actual birth certificate. A few printouts of emails Megan sent to school counselors, pretending to be a concerned aunt. I put them in a folder. Not for the speech, but just in case I kept thinking about my boyfriend. I hadn't told him everything until now. We were having dinner the night before the party. I laid it out in order. He listened. Then he asked, "What are you going to say up there?" I pulled out the paper. He read the first line and looked up. "You're serious?" "Yeah." He didn't try to stop me. That night, I heard from the same cousin again. She said one of the older uncles had once asked Claire whose kid I really was, and got shut down so fast it caused an argument that lasted years. She said some people in the family had always suspected, but no one wanted to say it out loud. The morning of the anniversary, I printed the final version of my real speech at a corner shop near my apartment. I folded it cleanly, slid it into a leather pouch, and placed it at the bottom of my purse. I zipped it shut, stood in front of the mirror in my navy dress, and for the first time called myself by my real name out loud. Just once. Then I grabbed my keys and headed out. The party was waiting. So was everything I had never been allowed to say. The vineyard was set up like a movie set. Rows of white chairs, strings of lights above the tables, and flower arrangements that looked professionally done. There were over 100 guests, some in suits, others in cocktail dresses, all moving from table to table with wine glasses in hand. Megan wore a fitted cream gown and stayed close to her husband, who looked like he belonged on a university board. Servers walked around offering champagne. A band played soft jazz. I kept my purse close and didn't take off my coat until the sun dipped behind the hills. Megan and Claire didn't come over, and instead one of Claire's sons waved me over to the family table and said, "You, Mom, saved you a seat." He meant Claire. I nodded and sat down without correcting him. During the cocktail hour, I watched people approach Claire and compliment her. "Your daughter looks beautiful," one of them said. Claire smiled and thanked them. Megan stood across the lawn, laughing with her in-laws like nothing in the world could touch her. Then came the slideshow. Someone dimmed the lights. The first image was of Megan and her husband on their wedding day. Then came photos of vacations, family holidays, and eventually pictures of me as a baby in Claire's arms, Claire narrating softly beside the screen, pointing out how much I'd grown. I sat there frozen, watching myself erased in time. When Megan got up to speak, she thanked everyone who's been there since day one. She called out cousins, neighbors, even old professors, but not me, not once. Right before the speeches started, Claire leaned over and said quietly, "Don't embarrass the family." She looked back at the crowd like nothing had happened. A few minutes later, they called my name. The microphone was already in place. I walked slowly to the front of the room, unfolded the page from my purse, and smiled. I started with the version everyone expected. A short joke about Megan's cooking, a vague compliment about family being complicated but important. People smiled. A few chuckled politely. Then I turned the page. Actually, there's something else I want to share. The room quieted. I spent most of my life being told to pretend that I was Claire's daughter, that Megan was just my aunt, that this lie was necessary for appearances, for reputations, for stability. Someone at the back said, "What?" But Megan isn't my aunt. She's my mother. She gave birth to me when she was 17. The silence after I said the words felt heavier than anything I'd experienced in my entire life. Like every molecule of air in that vineyard froze mid-motion. Like all the laughter and clinking glasses from earlier had been vacuum sealed out of the room. And for one long second, no one moved. No one breathed. I could feel every set of eyes locked on me, burning into my skin, waiting for someone else to speak first. But no one did. Not Megan, not Claire, not even the uncles and aunts who had spent years smiling at me with fake warmth at family gatherings, and I stood there gripping the microphone tighter than I meant to, my heart pounding so loud I half expected it to come through the speakers. And when I finally looked at Megan, really looked at her, she was standing frozen, pale, one hand gripping the back of her chair, her mouth slightly open like she wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words fast enough, and Claire, sitting 2 rows back, recovered first, shooting. Out of her chair with a forced laugh, her voice brittle and high-pitched. "All right, Fallon, that's enough. Let's not turn a family celebration into this." She waved her hand like she was swatting at smoke, looking around at the guests with an apologetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. But I didn't stop, didn't even hesitate. I kept going, listing the lies, the years of pretending, the school forms signed under Claire's name, the conversations I overheard, the About Me posters I wasn't allowed to finish. And as the words tumbled out, fast and unstoppable, I saw a few people's faces shift. One cousin covering her mouth, another uncle blinking like he was coming out of anesthesia, and somewhere near the back, I caught the eye of my grandmother's old neighbor, a woman I barely remembered but who nodded at me, slow and deliberate, like she'd known too but never had the space to say it. And when I finished, I folded my speech back into my purse, stood still for just a second longer, then walked straight down the center aisle, not running, not looking back, heels clicking hard against the stone pathway until I hit the parking lot and climbed into my car with shaking hands, locking the doors before I even put the key in the ignition. My heart still racing, but my breathing steady, and as I sat there for a minute trying to process what I'd just done, my phone lit up with notifications. Missed calls from Claire, 2 from Megan, 1 text from an unknown number just saying, "What the hell was that?" And 1 from my boyfriend that just read, "Proud of you. Whenever you're ready, call me." And I didn't answer any of them, just drove straight home, windows down, music off, letting the night air hit my face as the adrenaline slowly drained out of me. And by the time I got back to my apartment, there were already 3 voicemails waiting. Claire's voice harsh and clipped, accusing me of ruining her marriage, embarrassing her in front of family friends, saying I had no idea the sacrifices she made for me, and Megan's voice was softer, almost tearful, pleading, asking me to call her back so she could explain, saying things like, "You don't understand how hard it was for me," and "We'll talk about this calmly if you'll just come over." But none of it mattered, because the truth was already out, and whether they wanted to explain or rewrite or backtrack, I'd taken away their power to control the narrative. And when I checked Facebook out of morbid curiosity, I saw that the cousin who always stayed neutral had already posted something cryptic. Sometimes the truth takes years to find its voice, but when it does, there's no going back. And the comment section under it was already filling with confused friends and extended family asking what happened at the party. And I didn't comment, didn't answer messages, didn't post anything myself. I just closed the app, turned my phone on silent, curled up on my couch with a blanket, and let myself cry. Not out of regret or sadness, but out of pure, exhausted release. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying the lie for them anymore. And whatever came next, whatever fallout, whatever gossip, whatever awkward family conversations or angry voicemails or reputation cleanup campaigns Claire and Megan were about to launch, it didn't matter, because the secret was theirs to scramble after now, not mine. The next morning, before the sun even came up, my phone started vibrating on the nightstand, and I didn't even have to check to know who it was. But when I finally rolled over and looked, there were already 12 missed calls, 6 from Megan, 4 from Claire, and 2 from blocked numbers that I could only assume were landlines or friends of theirs. And when I opened my messages, the group chat that Claire had created years ago called Family Check-ins had exploded overnight, dozens of messages piling up. Some from cousins asking what happened, others from aunts saying things like, "Let's not air dirty laundry in front of strangers," and "This is a private family matter." And then there were the predictable ones from Claire herself. Paragraphs full of passive-aggressive language about public humiliation, ungratefulness, and irreversible damage, as if I had set a fire they didn't spend years stacking kindling for. And Megan's messages were shorter, more frantic, bouncing between apology and blame, one saying, "I was young and scared, please understand," another saying, "Do you know what you've done to this family?" And then a follow-up voicemail that started with a shaky, "I love you, Fallon, but," which I didn't even finish listening to because I already knew exactly where it was going. And by noon that day, my email inbox had new messages too. One from an aunt I hadn't seen in 3 years who opened with, "I know this is a sensitive topic, but was that really necessary?" And one from my old high school's administrative office asking for clarification on my identity records, because apparently Claire had already called them, trying to preemptively correct anything I might send their way. And the thing that really got me, the thing that almost made me laugh out loud from sheer disbelief, was when I saw a new Facebook status from Claire posted late the night before. One of those vague, dramatic, self-pitying paragraphs about being blindsided by someone you raised as your own, and how after everything I sacrificed, some people only repay you with cruelty and betrayal. And the comment section was already full of her friends offering sympathy, saying things like, "You're such a good mother, don't let anyone tell you otherwise." And kids can be so selfish these days. And reading that was like watching her build a brand new lie on top of the one I had just torn down. But this time, I didn't feel that familiar panic or guilt, just a slow burning clarity that kept me grounded as I spent the rest of the afternoon organizing my documents, printing copies of my birth certificate, drafting my official letter to the school board for my record correction, and emailing my lawyer with a list of dates and facts she'd asked me to prepare for the next steps in the identity correction process. And over the next few days, more cracks started to show. More people from the extended family reaching out privately, a few sending cautiously worded texts saying they always wondered, others apologizing for not asking more questions back then, one uncle even admitting that there had been a big fight years ago after he confronted Claire about suddenly having a kid without warning. And it was strange how these pieces started fitting together. Conversations I barely remembered, offhand comments from childhood that now made perfect sense, like the time a neighbor referred to me as Megan's daughter by accident, and the air in the room had gone cold for 10 full seconds. And through it all, Megan kept trying to regain control, sending long emotional emails about how scared she'd been at 17, how much pressure she was under, how she'd convinced herself this arrangement was the safest thing for everyone. But none of her explanations ever included the part where she could have told me the truth at any point over the last 15 years and chose not to. And when I didn't respond to her messages, she started leaving voicemails. Late at night, crying into the receiver, sometimes whispering things like, "You'll always be my baby." Sometimes shifting tone completely and saying she couldn't believe how cruel I was being to her after everything she'd done for me. And Claire? Claire doubled down, sending an actual letter through the mail, written on formal stationery, telling me I needed to issue a public clarification to the family to avoid further embarrassment, insisting that I misunderstood everything and that I was making people uncomfortable with unnecessary drama. And that's when I knew without a doubt that neither of them really cared about what this had done to me, only what it was doing to their image. And the more I watched them scramble to put out the fire, the more peaceful I felt about starting it in the first place, because for the first time, the shame and secrecy were sitting on their doorstep, not mine, and I wasn't picking it back up again. I chose the location carefully, a small coffee shop on the far side of town, where no one from our family would accidentally walk in, and I got there 20 minutes early just to sit and steady myself, running through every possible version of the conversation in my head, replaying every voicemail Megan had left, every paragraph she'd written in her late-night emails, all of it building toward this. And when she finally walked in, wearing oversized sunglasses and a beige sweater like she was trying to blend into the wall, I didn't stand to greet her, didn't offer a hug, just nodded toward the seat across from me, and she sat down without meeting my eyes, setting her purse on the chair like she needed something to hold on to. And for a full minute, neither of us said anything, the sound of espresso machines and quiet conversations from other tables filling the space between us, until finally she exhaled and said in a soft, rehearsed voice, "I didn't want it to be like this." And I just stared at her, waiting for her to continue because I wasn't going to make this easy, and she started down the path I expected, talking about how young she'd been, how terrified, how isolated, how much pressure there had been from Claire and her parents, how everyone around her had convinced her that this arrangement was the best solution, that letting Claire take the parental role would give me more stability, better chances, that no one thought she'd be capable of handling a baby at 17 while finishing her degree. And I listened without interrupting, my hands folded tightly in my lap, nodding occasionally but keeping my expression flat. Because none of this was news. None of it changed the fact that she had let the lie go on for 15 years, had let me grow up thinking I was some unwanted charity case shuffled between relatives, made me sit at school events with Claire in the front row pretending to be my mother while Megan stayed in the back like a distant aunt. And when she finally paused, waiting for me to say something, I let the silence stretch long enough that she started fidgeting with her coffee cup, tapping her nails against the lid, her breathing uneven, and when I finally spoke, my voice came out low and steady. "You had 1,000 chances to tell me the truth." And she opened her mouth like she was about to argue, but I kept going. "Every birthday, every school form, every time I asked about my dad, you had a choice. And you chose to lie. Again and again. Not because it was about protecting me, but because it was easier for you." And she flinched at that, eyes welling up, but I didn't stop. "Do you have any idea what it feels like to spend your entire childhood being treated like a secret? To walk into rooms and feel like you don't exist in your own life? To sit through family gatherings and listen to people call Claire my mother while you stood there saying nothing? Do you even understand what that does to a person? And she wiped at her face quickly, still trying to control the narrative, still trying to play the victim, saying things like, "I never meant for it to go on this long," and "I thought there would be a right time to tell you." And when I asked her when exactly that time was going to be, college graduation, my wedding day after she died, she didn't have an answer, just sat there blinking back tears. And when she finally whispered, "I was scared you'd hate me," I almost laughed because the irony of that was too big to ignore. And I leaned in slightly and said, "You didn't lie to protect me, you lied to protect yourself." And she covered her face with her hands like she couldn't bear to hear it. But I stayed exactly where I was, keeping my voice measured, because this wasn't about punishing her with screaming or theatrics. It was about making sure she understood, really understood, that I wasn't stepping back into the box she'd spent my entire childhood building for me. And when she finally pulled her hands away and asked, "So what happens now? Do you just cut me out completely?" I took a deep breath, already knowing my answer because I'd rehearsed it in the mirror more times than I could count, and I said, "I don't know what our relationship looks like going forward, but I do know this. I'm correcting my documents, I'm putting my real name on every record I can, and I'm done pretending this didn't happen." And when she opened her mouth again to plead or bargain or explain, I raised my hand to stop her. "You don't get to rush me through this, not after 15 years of control." And with that, I stood up, grabbed my bag, and left her sitting there in that corner booth, her coffee untouched, her shoulders shaking. And as I walked out into the cold air, I didn't feel triumphant or vindicated or even angry anymore. I just felt free, like I'd finally taken back something I never should have lost to begin with. The first step was the name change paperwork, and sitting in the clerk's office with a pen shaking slightly in my hand, staring at the line where I had to write my full legal name, I hesitated only for a breath before filling it out in bold, deliberate letters. Fallon Elise Grant. Not Fallon Elise Winters like it said on every school record, medical file, and form Claire had ever signed on my behalf. And it felt like reclaiming something physical, something I could actually hold, and once I submitted the application, I walked straight to the records department at my old high school, showed them my birth certificate, my court documents, and the official request to amend my educational file, and when the registrar looked up from the paperwork and said, "Do you want this reflected on your transcripts too?" I nodded without hesitation, because this wasn't just about future documents. It was about erasing 15 years of erasure. And when the lady at the counter handed me a small folder, with the correction confirmation stamped inside, I stood there for a second, holding it against my chest like it was a trophy. And on the bus ride home, I opened my phone and typed out a long message to my boyfriend, telling him everything I'd done that day, how it felt, how terrified and exhilarated I was all at once. And within seconds, he replied, "I'm proud of you. You're writing your own story now." And I just sat there, grinning like an idiot, while people around me pretended not to notice. And over the next 2 weeks, I scheduled meetings with my college registrar to start the process of updating my university records, booked appointments with a trauma-informed therapist specializing in family identity trauma, and started drafting the affidavit my lawyer said I'd need if I wanted to make sure no one in that family could legally misrepresent me again. And through all of it, Megan kept trying to break the silence, sending emails, leaving voice notes, each one laced with emotional landmines. Lines like, "You don't understand how hard this is for me," and "Can't we just move forward without making this a legal circus?" But I didn't answer, didn't bite, didn't give her the emotional currency she was looking for, because I wasn't doing this for revenge or attention. I was doing it for survival, for clarity, for the little kid who sat through school, assemblies wondering why none of the other moms looked at her the way Claire did. And one rainy afternoon, as I sat in my room surrounded by old papers, scanning and organizing everything for my lawyer, I drafted a post, something I never thought I'd do, and after rereading it 10 times, I hit publish. For anyone wondering why I've been quiet after the family party, here's the truth. I spent 15 years being called someone else's child, being erased from my own history to protect other people's reputations. I've started the legal process to correct my identity, and I'm doing this because I deserve to live as myself, not as a lie, not as someone else's cover story. This isn't about blame or bitterness. It's about truth. Thank you to the friends and family who've reached out with support. And for the ones still sitting in silence, I hope someday you ask yourselves why. And within an hour, the post started gaining traction. First a few likes, then comments, private messages, even distant relatives I barely remembered reaching out to say they'd always wondered, that they'd heard whispers but never had proof, that they believed me. And I felt something shift inside, like the narrative that had always belonged to Megan and Claire was finally mine to tell. And later that night, as I lay in bed scrolling through supportive messages, my boyfriend sent me one last text before I fell asleep. "You're not invisible anymore." And for the first time, I actually believed it. The final letter from Megan arrived 2 weeks after my post went up, handwritten on pale blue stationery that still smelled faintly like her house, folded neatly in thirds like she'd sat at her dining room table rehearsing each word before committing it to paper, and I almost didn't open it. Almost shoved it straight into the back of the drawer with every other apology she'd tried sending since the party. But curiosity, or maybe closure, got the better of me, and as I unfolded it, I could practically hear her voice in every line. Her dramatic pauses, her carefully chosen phrases about regret and doing the best she could with the tools she had. How she hoped that someday I'd understand that she never stopped loving me, that everything she did was to protect me, and how watching me turn against her so publicly had been the most painful thing she'd ever experienced. And reading that last part made me pause, not out of sympathy, but because even now, even after everything, she still made it about herself, about her pain, her image, her narrative, and I refolded the letter with steady hands, slid it into a folder with all the other documentation, and filed it away without answering, because this wasn't about her feelings anymore. It was about my boundaries, my healing. And as the final court approval for my identity correction came through later that month, I stood in the small county office holding the stamped documents with my real name, my name, printed bold and clean, across the top, and for the first time in my life, I felt the weight of it settle on me in the best possible way, like something clicking into place that had always been loose, always slightly off. And a week later, I sat at my desk, filling out a passport application, writing Fallon Elise Grant at the top of the form with a kind of reverence, like each letter was its own small victory. And when the application asked for parental information, I paused just long enough to exhale before leaving the father's name blank, because that part of the story wasn't mine to chase right now. And under mother's name, I wrote Megan's full name, not because she'd earned the title in the way she should have, but because facts are facts, and I wasn't going to live in a fantasy version of my life anymore, not even on paper. And a few days after that, I packed up the last of the old documents. School records with Claire's last name, outdated medical files, even that About Me poster from second grade I'd kept, buried in a box for some reason, and I took them to a shredding service downtown. Stood there watching years of lies and false labels turn into paper confetti, and as the machine hummed, I felt lighter than I had in years. And that weekend, I visited the park near my apartment, the one with the big oak trees and the view of the city skyline, and I sat on a bench with my boyfriend, sipping coffee, laughing about something small and stupid. And for a long, peaceful stretch of time, I didn't think about Megan or Claire or the party or the lies or any of it. I just existed, fully and unapologetically myself. And when I finally did glance down at my phone and saw one last missed call from a number I recognized as Claire's landline, I didn't feel the familiar spike of dread or the urge to call back. I just hit delete, slid my phone into my pocket, and kept walking toward whatever came next, free and done, and finally whole.